Hi, everyone. Ethan here. Before we get started today, I just wanted to jump in on behalf of the entire team and say thank you so much for listening to the show this year. It's been a really crazy first year for And So She Left. We won a couple of awards, we were nominated for a few others, and of course, we got to speak to dozens of wonderful entrepreneurs, listen to their stories, their practical advice, and it's just been an absolute blast. We're going to be taking the rest of December off as we wind down the year, but we're going to be back in January with new episodes, so look forward to that very soon. So thank you so much again for listening. Have a wonderful holiday break and enjoy the episode.
Picture the goals you have for your company. If you're like most entrepreneurs, your North Star hangs pretty high. We love to set lofty, ambitious goals for ourselves. After all, it's in our nature. But what separates those of us who reach our goals from those who don't are the skills we obtain and use to get there. Leah Carr's approach to entrepreneurship is a highly grounded one. She's the CEO of a learning and development company called TILR, that's T.I.L.R. They help HR teams and people leaders to hone in on the proficiencies their employees need, shedding light on upskilling opportunities while aligning employee and company goals. Leah herself has held a wide range of jobs. Unlike most of our guests, she jumped from early-stage startups to enter the banking world, then leaped back into startup life once again. Her reasoning is simple. She chases opportunities no matter where they crop up, over hyper-defined goals. With a masterful grasp of learning and development, Leah joins us for a practical discussion about absorbing new skills as a nimble operator. This episode hands you the answers to burning questions like, what skills are most valuable right now? How do you adapt to a job market in constant flux? And how can I take a skills-based approach to picking a realistic long-term career? You're about to hear Leah's best learning and development advice. If you're looking to future-proof your career or your company through a skills-first approach, then this episode is essential learning. I'm Catherine Vasilopoulos, and this is And So She Left, the podcast about incredible women entrepreneurs and the wisdom they uncovered beyond the corporate world. There's really no end to the list of skills you can acquire, but each of us has a different destination. Not every skill will help you land the next opportunity that you're excited about. So to start out, I asked Leah to narrow that list a little. What skill are most companies looking for?
The number one set of skills that a lot of customers are looking for to invest in first are leadership skills. That seems to be where companies at least perceive the biggest gap is. And, it's not surprising because as we look at how skills are changing, the soft skills are really what's in demand. I think according to LinkedIn, the biggest skill in demand in their report last year was communication and empathy. So it makes sense to me that leadership would be one of the most in demand skill sets.
Oh, that's very interesting. So, because when I think of skill set, I'm thinking about, hard labor, manual labor, and those softer skills, yes, are very important. And I think it's interesting that those are the ones that future employers are looking for also in candidates, like leadership and communication, as you said. Those are really important. And how do you develop that?
I'm going to answer your question, but I just want to add one more thing to what you said. Brene Brown came out with this and I thought it was so great. She talked about how we moved from the era of physical strength. And you talked about this, that manual labor, in the 1920s, that was really what was required. And then we moved into, I think she calls it the era of brain strength, developers, data scientists. And I don't want to imply in any way that that's not important. But now she talks about how we're moving into the era of heart, those people skills, the empathy, the being able to communicate, that those are really what's important. And the pandemic has really had that shift. But to answer your question, how do you train those skills? Again, I think there's various options. We tend to integrate with e-learning providers. So, we offer a lot of courses through our platform. We also have custom content. But at the end of the day, it's one thing to learn a skill. It's another thing to develop a skill. And so what we really recommend for our customers is make sure that when someone's taking a course, there's opportunities to use those skills. So let's talk about, one of the communication skills would be presentations. If you have someone and they're going to take a course in presentations, have this person teach a lunch and learn afterwards. Gives them an opportunity to not only share their knowledge with other people, but also to really test out and use those skills.
So it's tell me what I've just taught you kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And so with all this work that you're doing in this current job, are you seeing some challenges in implementing all this?
Yeah, I think one of the bigger challenges that we've been facing for a while is HR budgets are almost always the first to be cut, especially in technology. We've moved from, this growth at all costs mindset to a leaner mindset, which overall I think is great. But often that means that the learning and development budget is being cut. It's been a challenge, not just for, companies like ours, but also a real challenge for learning and development and HR professionals who get into it because one of the things they love the most is helping other people build and grow their careers. And, it's also a challenge because skills have changed so much. Companies often don't have the skills they need to compete. And so they're missing out on business opportunities. They're missing out on sales. And it's just this vicious cycle. And so the challenge is really helping companies and our customers understand, you can't afford not to invest in learning and development, but you've probably been doing it wrong and seeing no return. And let us help you do it right.
Yes, and the investment in the skill set for each individual also then has to translate into employability or upscaling or being able to have better opportunities down the road. It can't just be, I'm going to learn something and then there's no opportunity. So tell me if there's a mismatch currently happening.
Yeah, I think that we often don't realize that learning and development is in fact learning and then development. I see a lot of learning going on. There's a lot of people taking a lot of courses, especially since it's so accessible right now. But the most important piece is the development. And so you need to make sure that those opportunities are available when someone completes a course. And, you don't always have to do the learning before the development. Sometimes you can do it together. One of the other things we do in our product is we have this amazing Boolean search. When you put in, your and or logic, we have a little learning icon that you can click on. So we'll show you people who meet the, requirements of your skill search, but we'll also show you individuals who want to learn a skill. And so we encourage companies, hey, you're building a project team. Why don't you put 2 people who have the skills and 1 person who just learned the skill or who wants to acquire the skill, and make sure that you're thinking about that as you're assigning work and building teams.
Describe what that term means, the Boolean search.
Oh, so Boolean search is and or logic. So you can say, I need someone who has sales skills or they have customer service and leadership skills.
Oh, I see. So it's a way to maximize the database search results.
That's exactly right.
Oh, okay. I gotcha. Okay. We were talking about issues that come up over the last few decades, like automation has taken over, and we thought we would lose jobs on the basis of that, or the pandemic came along and just disrupted everything. Can you tell me more about how that has influenced your career?
Yeah. So in 2007, it was predicted that 45% of jobs would be eliminated because of automation. And we just sort of accepted that as reality and, went on with our day. And then, that didn't happen. And, you combine that with the advances in AI, the digital acceleration because of COVID, and the skills for jobs have just changed so much. In terms of how that's personally affected me, well, the biggest way is that I happen to have been working at the bank, leading digital banking when the pandemic hit, which is when a massive digital acceleration happened, especially in banking. It was just such an amazing opportunity to scale my team quickly, work with the government, delivering projects. So I personally really got to upskill during that time. I happened to be in the right place at the right time. And then coming out of the bank and the pandemic, actually similar timing for me, I joined a company that was originally in the hiring space. And, I had had all this experience in the bank with needing to invest in skills really quickly because of that digital acceleration, and really struggling to work within the bank's framework of how they did learning and development. It really just gave me the idea for what we're doing now.
I think that's very interesting what you said. Like when people are faced with a big tragedy or something that shifts everything, you need to pivot. The banking system is an excellent example. I remember standing outside in a lineup with 2 meters apart between myself and someone else, and the masks and everything. And the banks had to completely change. How many people were in your team at that point? Do you remember?
I had about 250
That's impressive.
when the pandemic hit, and we had 400
Wow.
within the first 6 months.
And does that fuel you to have so many people working with you, or do you prefer to have smaller teams like in a startup kind of situation?
It's interesting because when we were in office, yeah, it was great. I mean, I could walk the floor, I could talk to everyone and build those relationships, help them build their career. But when the pandemic hit, the team was growing, but I didn't get so much exposure beyond my leadership team
Hmm.
because it's a bank. Like I was in back-to-back meetings all day. I don't know. I really just love being a people leader. So I'm really grateful to have that opportunity, whether it's a small team or a big team. But for me, the most success and joy comes from seeing others achieve and build their careers.
We're thinking about future generations and their skills and development and what's coming up for them. What opportunities are open to them? And are they being realistic in terms of the jobs that are available to them? Are we looking at a whole generation coming up saying, I just want to be an influencer?
It's such an interesting question. I have maybe a little bit of fact and a lot of opinion on it. In terms of the influencers, I think it looks way easier than it is. You hear these stories. Oh, 12-year-old is opening toys and making $2 million a year. And you're like, oh, I want to do that. And again, this is not a fact. I don't think this is going to continue forever. Mm-hmm. I think the era of influencers will be short-lived, and maybe I'm biased because I don't really like it that much. But I still think you have a really good question about, are, those being educated now realistic about the job opportunities? And I think it's hard for them to even know what they should plan for because jobs are changing so much right now. And so I don't remember the exact stat, but it's the kids in elementary school today are, for the majority, going to be in jobs that don't even exist. I read Adam Grant's Think Again, and he says something that's just always really stuck with me. And I kind of alluded to it at the beginning, which is that I've chased opportunities instead of goals. And maybe that's why this sticks with me so much. But he said, we start asking kids when they're like 2 or 3, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, a lot of kids are going to pick what their parents do. I want to be a teacher. I want to be an engineer.
Yes.
Because that's what they're exposed to. I know, just cute little fun story. I was with my 5-year-old niece the other day. We were playing Barbies and she was saying, Barbie's going to a meeting. And I was like, but what's the meeting about? And she's like, it's a meeting. What do you mean? She knows enough that she sees her dad in meetings, but like that's the extent. She wouldn't know that he's an accountant and what he's dealing with. So she probably wouldn't answer accountant. She's answering, meetings. When a lot of us were growing up, we sort of knew the jobs that were going to be available to us. And for some people, you pick that career early on and you just work towards it. And I think for the older generations, they picked it and stuck to it. I want to be a doctor. And then you studied to be a doctor. And then sometimes you get there and you're like, wait a minute, did I really want to do this? Or did I just say I wanted to do this for so long that I thought I was going to want it? And I think what these, kids today will have is that they're not going to have the ability to do that for the most part. And they're not going to be able to say, I want to be X, and then X might not exist when they get there. And so I think that's an exciting opportunity for them. But what I think is challenging for them, especially those that are in the, high school university phase, is the high schools and universities haven't necessarily been able to adapt as fast as we need them to offer the skills for those who are entering the workforce today and in the near future. And so I think you're seeing that education is changing. E-learning is becoming huge. E-learning and more specifically micro-learning. I need to know this one thing. I'm going to watch a 20-minute course and I'm going to learn how to do it. And when I need to do the next part of it, I'm going to watch another 20-minute course.
Right. Interesting. And I'm looking at this whole picture and thinking, we have to just keep allowing people to learn as they go because we need to adapt to what's quickly changing in our markets, especially in technology, especially in AI, anything that has to do with rapidly growing sectors that we know universities or even the legal system can't keep up with. It moves too quickly.
I think where we need to really adapt is on the job. I think we need to be more open to it. Where I think hiring is going to go is, I need 12 skills for this role. And these are the 3 I need you to have when I hire you, but I'm willing to train you on these other 9. And, you'll get hired with a training plan in place because I think that's going to be what the company needs to do.
Let's talk a bit about the optics that companies want to project when they put together these skills and development and learning and development programs. What's your take on this? Do companies do it because they want to or because they have to?
There's still a lot of companies out there that are doing it to look good. It's a perk that a lot of people expect. So, you get offered your salary, you get offered your PTO, you get offered your benefits. And, one of the benefits is often like, hey, here's 500 or 1,000 a year that you can use for learning and development. But that's where it starts and ends. There's no one telling you these are the skills that we believe you should learn to get better at your job or hit your next goal. And even worse, sometimes someone goes off and I'll use an extreme example. They learn to play guitar and they come back and they're like, well, I want to play guitar for the company. And you're like, well, we don't need anyone to play guitar. But if you had talked in advance, maybe you would learn that your company does need someone to play the ukulele and you would have suggested that instead. And that person would have been really happy learning how to play ukulele. And then they could have come back and done that for the company. And now this individual has their growth and development. You have someone who's making a bigger impact and getting better outcomes for the company. And we don't have that alignment. Like we're way too surface level and we need to get in way deeper.
How do we do that?
Number 1, you need to understand the skills for your roles, the proficiency that's needed in those skills. You need to then look at the skills of an individual. And I always say, let's start with skills gaps and upskilling opportunities. Because I think another thing we have I don't want to put it all on employers. Some of it is also entitled employees. You're 6 months into your job and you're like, I want this promotion. I want this lateral move. Well, I think people need to think about growth, not only as moving roles or being promoted, but also as developing their skills. And so, we always say, let's start with the upskilling opportunities and skills gaps that you want to close within your existing role. Once you've done that, now we want to look at growth. And when it comes to growth, let's align the goals of that employee with the needs of the company so that there is that win-win situation going on. And I think you need to take a skills first approach to that. Because how else can you possibly understand what you need? And, a really good company, we haven't quite figured out how to crack this nut yet, but I think we'll get there, is being able to say, well, this is how this role is going to change in the next, 6 to 18 months. And you start pre-giving people the skills that they're going to need.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about, you've had a journey in multiple sectors and multiple size companies. And what has been very difficult for you in this whole journey?
I think people expect me to say adapting to the bank, but it was really the bank adapting to me. In banks, you have a lot of people who have only ever worked in banks, often only ever in that one bank. And, you have someone like me who's fairly far into their career and, I'm just working and people are like pulling me aside and they're like, you're pretty rogue. And I'm like, I can be rogue, but I'm not being rogue. I'm like, this is just how I work and how everyone I know works. And so, little things that they want you to adapt to that I refuse to adapt to is like, I was on the tech team and we'd have tech and business leadership meetings. And if I didn't pre-meet with the senior tech people before presenting something at that meeting, the tech guy would never be on my side. And I'm like, why would I waste my time pre-meeting with the tech side when the business side controls the money? Doesn't even make any sense. And so, I think there was a lot of love-hate relationships with someone like me because I'm really good at delivering, but I'm not following their rules. mostly because to me, they're not rational and they're not efficient. And, I say like one of my most interesting things was how people didn't understand how strategically things worked. I worked for someone at one point who would be like texting me, like, don't talk to my boss like that in front of this guy. And I was like, yeah, but this other guy is going to get me what I want. And he's like, it's not how it works. And I eventually was really teaching him strategy, and he'd never believe me. I'd say like, this is how things work. And he'd be like, no, it's not how things work. I'd say, go away for a week and observe. And he'd always come back and say like, oh, that is how things work. And it was one of my most favorite parts was like seeing this individual who had been in the bank for, 2.5 decades change because an outsider came in. And yeah, of course, sort of starting something from scratch is the biggest challenge of all. And also doing it in such a challenging time. VCs are changing the way they invest. The economy is going down. The way sales are done is changing. And that's been the biggest challenge to date, feeling like an absolute failure on some days and like a total success on others.
But I think I like what you said before when you said you went rogue. It's a cool characteristic to have as a human to say, I can go rogue anytime I want. And maybe that helps you manage that roller coaster, the some days that are great and the other days that are not. You have that ability to, I'm going to step outside the box. I'm going to do something that breaks all the rules, or this doesn't make sense to me, then I'm going to do the opposite.
Others would call it rogue. I would say like, I am just a hyper rational and logical person to the point that like I am in a constant debate with a couple of my friends, including this morning, where they say rational and logical is subjective. And my argument is you may think you're being rational and logical based on your values and goals, but it's still black and white. But my point in all that is I'm so hyper rational and logical that I am operating by what I think is the most rational, the most logical, the most efficient. And so I think it looks rogue to a lot of people because they're like, well, this is how we do things here. And I'm like, well, I don't care because I was brought here to have impact and I'm going to do what it takes. Always people first for me. I'm always going to support my people and that's my main focus. But then I want to deliver. And so when the way things are done isn't efficient, I'm not going to do that. And I'm okay if people call me rogue for that.
Tell me about any kind of advice that you would have to people who are thinking of either starting their own venture or leaving something that they're currently in and want to start something new, or do what you did, which is just to jump around from small to big to small and just explore and investigate what comes next for them.
I think I would definitely advise people to try to do something at a bigger company earlier in their career, because I think what you really learn in those bigger companies is process. And I think the other thing that's really important is you learn how these bigger organizations work, because when you're working in a smaller organization, they often want to work with bigger organizations. And if you understand how things work internally and how to navigate, that will really help you. So that's one piece. If you're looking to start your own thing, I would just say, like, make sure the pieces are in place. Do some validation on your product before you're hopping out of your job and making that leap. Make sure that you've set yourself a timeline, like, here's how long I can afford to do this to. Build a list of your contacts. Make sure you're chatting with people. You're building relationships with the right people. I mean, raising money is a community effort. Like, you will need intros. You will need advice. You will need help. And just be prepared. Like, people tell you, it's an emotional roller coaster. I have someone from BMO who joined me at TILR, and I told him, like, it's a roller coaster. And I said, not like 1 week is up, 1 week is down. It's like one day may have a bunch of ups and downs. So I think before you do it, you just need to talk to a bunch of people who have done it so you can really mentally and even physically, to an extent, prepare for it. And I think that's my other piece of advice is you have to learn what's really important to you. For me, it's health and fitness. I know if I'm not making time to eat the right things and get in a workout, I am miserable and I am not productive. And so really figuring out before you start, like, what are the things I cannot compromise in my life in order for me to be successful, and making sure that you stick to those.
And what kind of advice would you have given your former self when you were much younger, knowing what you know now?
Oh, that is a good question. I'll give you a piece of advice that I like to give to others, which is that if it doesn't equally excite you and scare you, it's probably not the right opportunity. You'll probably be bored really quickly. I think a lot of us, especially women, turn down opportunities because we feel like we can't do it. It's scary. We've never done it before, and we don't take those chances. But it's good when something scares you a little. Scary and exciting, that's where growth takes place. And so I think you need to sometimes take that step back and say like, okay, wait, why am I scared? And then say, okay, I'm scared because I don't think I can do this. But then starting to say to yourself, well, I've done that. And then you get pumped up and you're like, okay, I'm ready. So really, like, don't be too hard on yourself and take some risks.
Thank you so much to Leah Carr. You can learn more about T.I.L.R through the link in the episode description. If you like the show, please rate, review, and subscribe to And So She Left wherever you listen. Your feedback helps us to better serve current listeners and reach new ones. You can also fill out our quick feedback form. It's just 5 questions long, and your response helps us to make the show that you want to hear. And So She Left is made by Cansulta and Ethan Lee. Cansulta connects entrepreneurs and leaders with a global roster of over 150 pre-vetted consultants and experts like Ethan and I, who can help organizations in any business area, from strategy to finance to sales and marketing, and even training, learning, and development. Our music is by Chris Zabriskie, edited for your enjoyment. You can find a list of all the songs you heard here in the episode notes. I'm Catherine Vasilopoulos, and thanks for listening.